45,000. That is the number of Christian denominations today. Some argue that this represents the universality of the faith, that it can fit into any worldview or any culture. However, others argue that the faith is so disheveled it is actually impossible to identify what Christianity even is. Does Christianity include magical practices like exorcisms and faith healings? Should adherents worship saints and martyrs or animals and ancestors? Was Jesus really God incarnate, or was he simply a mediator between heaven and earth? Are the requirements for salvation faith alone, or must one display the fruits of their faith through works? Now, if each denomination has a different answer to these questions, is it really fair to group them all into one singular religion? Let's take a look at other major religions and their denominations. For example, Islam has two major denominations that include 95% of their believers. What's also interesting is that these two denominations are not mutually exclusive. We see something similar in Judaism, which has four different categories. They're not even called denominations. Jews actually reject the idea of denominations, and they're completely fine with people changing churches or changing beliefs. Lastly, Hinduism has 0 denominations. Then we get to Christianity, 45,000 denominations, many of which are mutually exclusive. Here's a brief breakdown of some of the denominations. Catholics make up a majority of Christians at 50%, and this is roughly 1.3 billion people. Despite lacking popularity in the United States, Pentecostal Christians account for 11% of all Christians in the world. The third most popular denomination is Anglicanism at 5%, and then non-denominational Christianity and Baptist churches are tied for 3.5%. Now, I'm sure this question is going to come up. What about Protestantism? Many people break up the church into Catholics, Protestants, Presbyterians, Eastern Orthodox. Well, it turns out that Protestantism is a bunch of different churches, including this list here. Saying you're Protestant is a little bit like saying you're from Europe. It gives somebody a general sense of where you're from, but Europe is comprised of tons of different countries. So saying you're from Europe is not sufficient. It's kind of vague. Saying you're a Protestant is vague. There's a variety of beliefs that are different among different groups of Protestants. Many of the churches on this list that we've talked about have mutually exclusive beliefs. So the largest split is definitely between Catholics and the rest of Christianity. Catholicism is a pretty impressive sect of Christianity, as its power has been centralized in a figure, the Pope. And although church doctrine does change a little bit amongst different areas of the world or different areas of the country, they have a standardized set of beliefs. As we'll see, this is going to factor into a lot of other denominations, as they don't have that organization that the Catholic Church does. So now my favorite denomination by far is non-denominational Christianity, because it's just a complete contradiction. So based on what I've researched, a denomination outlines a set of beliefs within a religion that differs from the other beliefs in that same religion. And so saying you're a non-denominational Christian is you're taking the impossible position of agreeing with everybody. If you disagree with anybody in that religion, then you are a denomination. So claiming that you're non-denominational is just incoherent. Anyway, let's get back to the other denominations. In my opinion, the best and most relevant way to distinguish amongst these denominations is by their salvation requirements. So as we can see, the requirements for admission into heaven vary significantly across all these denominations, and especially with all the rest that aren't Catholicism. Even amongst these groups like non-denominational Christians or Baptists or Pentecostal Christians, you have tons of things that don't even line up. Like they can't even agree completely on what their salvation requirements are. You have fractures within fractures of the church. So when trying to identify Christianity as a whole, I think we can be charitable and claim that there are 1.2 to 1.3 billion Christians, and this is the Catholics. With this in mind, perhaps a true chart of the world's religions would look something like this, where there is no category for Christianity and it is instead broken down into independent denominations. Here we see Catholicism is still a major world religion inside the top 3. However, religions such as non-denominational Christianity are ranked 11th, comprising of just 1% of the total population of the world. So why might this be important? Well, in my experience, many Christians see their faith as kind of number one in the world, as most relevant and most important. I think it's time for us to realize that aside from Catholicism, Christianity is a completely fractured belief system. Recognizing that just 1% of the population of the world agrees with you might help people consider other belief systems that exist that contradict their original one. Or at bare minimum, acknowledge the fact that many people are out there disagree with them, and that is okay for us to disagree on our worldviews. So now I think it's time that we consider a few questions. Is it time to change how we talk about Christianity? Is it fair to say that 2.6 billion Christians exist if at best only half of them can be saved based on their own salvation requirements? Perhaps we should throw away the term Christianity entirely, or use it sparingly, and instead identify each denomination as its own individual religion. I think this makes the most sense if salvation is going to be the primary motivator for distinctions among these different religions. Because based on the Catholic idea of salvation, a Baptist is no closer to heaven than a Mormon, a Hindu, a Jew, or an atheist. So does grouping Baptists and Catholics together really make that much sense? This issue stems from an inherent weakness in Christianity. The fact that anybody can take the doctrines that are in Christianity and use them to support their own beliefs. Christians throughout history have simultaneously opposed slavery while also being the ones enslaving people. I made an entire video about this. Here, go check it out.